Hello YouTube, we're on the Real Programming channel and I'm its host. My name is Andrei. Welcome, I greet you on my channel. And this is our 100th lesson. This is a final about HTML and CSS chapter, and we will talk about top 10 last topics. And we'll be start with two topics: vendor-specific CSS properties. Okay, the browser makers, in the other words, a vendor like Microsoft, Mozilla, the folk behind WebKit, and so on, often add new functionality to their browsers to test new features or to implement CSS extensions that are being considered but aren't yet approved by the standards bodies. In this case, vendors create CSS properties that looks like this. Okay, start with a dash. This is dash, and another dash, underline dash. And the vendor the identifier here, it's most for Mozilla, the property and transform property. You should feel free to make use of these vendor-specific properties, but they aren't necessarily intended for use in the shipping products. The property may never be approved as a legit standard, or the vendor may change the implementation of the property at any time. To date, said many of us needed to be able to create pages that use the latest and greatest technology, but do so knowing that you're using properties that may change. If you're going to make use of this property, then often you'll create CSS that looks like this. First, we will list the general property in the case it's supported, and in case it's supported or gets supported in the future: Safari, Chrome, Mozilla, Opera, Internet Explorer. Then we list the vendor-specific versions. You can typically find these vendor-specific properties in the developer documentation and release notes for each browser, or by participating in the forums associated with each browser's development process. And if you are wondering what the transformer property really does, check out the number 3 CSS Transformations and Transitions section on the next minute. And 3 CSS Transforms and Transitions. Using CSS, you can now do full-blown 2D and 3D transformations on elements. Rather than talk about it, let's look at an example. Type this one type, it's worth it. Here is the basic style for the box div below. The position is absolute, and glad you're stuck with all throughout that position chapter. And let's give the div its position and size and make it red. This style rule applies only if the div is in the hover state. You can hover over divs too. When you're hovering your mouse over the div, we transform the element by rotating it 4 or 5 degrees. We still need browser-specific extensions for this. This will only work in Internet Explorer 9+. Here is the div we're transforming. Go ahead and type this and then give it a test drive. When you pass our mouse over the box div, you should see it transforms so that it is rotated by 45 degrees. Now what if you we want to make that transformation smooth with a nice animation? That's where transitions come in. So turn the page, mouse over the div to see it rotate. Okay, we can add the transformation property to the box, and div the rule have it transforms its new state over 2 seconds. Here's how we do that. The transformation box transition property say if your value of the transform property changes transition from the current value of transform to the new value of transform over the specified duration. The default value to transform is nothing. That is, there is no transform, but when you hover your mouse over the box, the value of transform is changed to a 4 or 5 degree rotation, so that the transition from the no transform to a 4 or 5 degree rotation transform happens over 2 seconds. The value of the transition property is another property in the case transform, and the duration in the case 2 seconds. When the value of the specified property changes, the transition causes the change to happen over the specified duration, which creates an animation effect. You can transition other CSS properties too, like weight or opacity. Internet Explorer currently has a version of 9 has support for transition, but may in version 10, so you won't see the animation if you use Internet Explorer 2 seconds. For interactivity, HTML pages don't have to be passive documents, and they can also have content that executable. Executable content gives your page's behavior. You create executable content by writing programs or scripts using a scripting language called Javascript. Here is a little taste of what it means to put executable content into your page. Okay, here is a new HTML element script, which allows you to place code right inside of HTML. We are using the ID and this ID. The form to get a handle to the form in the JavaScript, so we can do this with it, like define what happens when a button is clicked. And here is a bit of JavaScript head that checks a user bit to make sure it's not there dollars or less. If a bit is greater than 0, we submit the form, otherwise we don't, because it's an error. There in HTML script, and you can create a form that uses this script to check the bit before the form is submitted. If the bit is more than 0, and the form gets submitted. In JavaScript we can define what happens when the submit button is clicked, and add the value of the input with the ID of bit. What else can scripting do? Form input validation, like we did above, is a common and the useful task that is often done with JavaScript, and the types of validation you can go far beyond this example, but that's just the beginning of what you can do with JavaScript, as you'll see on the next page. HTML5 APIs and web apps interact with the way that works for the desktop and the mobile devices. Sorry. Okay, in addition, in the element HTML5, HTML5 comes in a whole new set of application programming interfaces, APIs for sure that they are accessible to the JavaScript. These APIs open a whole new universe of expression and functionality to your web page. And let's look at just a few things you might do with them. With HTML5's APIs and JavaScript, you can create a 2D drawable surface right in your page, no plugins is required. Make your page's location everywhere to know where your users are. Show them what's nearby. Take them on a scavenger hunt. Give them directions to bring people with common interests together in the same area. Use web workers to turbocharge your JavaScript code and do some serious computation or make your app more responsive. You can even make better use of your user's multi-core processor. Access any web service and bring data back to your app in near real time. Cache data local using browser storage to speed up mobile apps. Integrate your pages with Google Maps and even let your users track their movement in real life. Create your own video playback controls using HTML5 and JavaScript. No need for special plugins to play video. Make use of browser-based local storage. Store lots of preferences and data for your users locally in the browsers and even make it available for offline access. The browser is clearly not just for a boring document anymore. With JavaScript you can draw pixels directly into the browser, superchange your forms with JavaScript to provide real interactivity, build complete video experiences that incorporate video in new ways, use the power of JavaScript to full-blown video processing in your browsers, create special effects and even directly manipulate video pixels. Motivated yet? You'll find all these examples in books HTML5 programming. 6. More and web fonts. We would like to have spent a lot more time on the web fonts, so they ended up making our 10 things we didn't cover, even though we did cover them. If you are using web fonts, there are a few more things you should know and investigate. So we put together a top 10 of things you should know about web fonts. There are services that helps then paying out of using web fonts like Google Web Fonts, Fonts, WPW, Fonts.com, Web Fonts, and the extensions come. Browsers behave differently while they download your font. Some browsers display a backup font, while others wait for the font to be downloaded before rendering the text. Once you downloaded a font, it is cached by your browsers and not retrieved again the next time you encounter a page that uses it. All modern browsers, Internet Explorer 9 Plus, support the Web Open Font format WOFF, which is likely to become the web font standard. However, Internet Explorer up to version 8 supports a font standard different from all other modern browsers EOD and has a bug that prevents the browser from loading multiple fonts, so you can just list more than one font in your font face rule. If you not to support web fonts or in Internet Explorer 8 and earlier, the services maintained both can insulate you from having to worry about these cross-browser compatibility issues. 5. There are many free fonts out there. Look for open source fonts to find fonts you can include in your web page for free. Because web fonts and the real fonts, you can apply any styling to them just like you can to conventional fonts. Using web fonts can have some impact on the performance of your page, but is considered a better practice and will typically provide better performance than using custom graphic images for typography. Okay, 8. Limit the fonts in your font face rule to only the fonts used on a particular page. 9. If you have existing font licenses, check with your vendor they may allow web usage. 10. Sphere conventional fonts always include a fallback font in case your page's font isn't available or an error is encountered reviewing or decoding it. Okay, 7. Tools for creating web pages. Now that you know HTML and CSS, you're in a good position to decide if tools like Dreamviewer, Expansion Web or Code are for you. Some of these applications give you a much richer editors with features like code coloring and the built-in preview to make creating and editing your HTML and CSS easier. Some of these applications and provide what you see is what you get. WYCIVYG tools for creating web page. We are sure you know thought about HTML and browser support to know that this goal, while worthwhile, also comes up short from time of time. But that said, these tools also provide some very handy features even if you are writing a lot of the HTML yourself. A code window for entering HTML and CSS with syntax checking to catch common mistakes and suggest common names and attributes as you type. A preview and publish functionality that allows you to test pages before making them live on the web. site manager that allows you to organize your site and also keeps your local changes in sync with your website on the server. This usually takes care of the FTP work for you. Some provide built-in validation, so you know your page is valid as you develop it. These tools are also not without their downsides. Sometimes these tools lag behind standards in terms of support, so to keep your HTML and CSS current, you may need to write or edit the HTML yourself. Not all of these tools enforce the strict standards and may allow you get sloppy with your HTML and CSS, so don't forget to validate if your tool doesn't provide built-in validation. Keep in your mind that you can use a combination of simple editors along with these more sophisticated tools. One solution doesn't have to fit all your needs, so use a page creation tool when it makes sense. Some tools to consider: Dreamweaver, Hype, Coda, Microsoft Expression, Webflux, Maya Clips. The latest and greatest in web editors is always in a flux. To be sure to check the web for all the options for tools. 8. XHTML5. We are pretty taught on XHTML in this book, with the whole XHTML is our thing. The truth is, when it comes to XHTML, it is only XHTML2 and the letter that has died. And in fact, you can write your HTML5 using XHTML style if you want to. Why would you want to? Well, you might need to validate to transform your documentation as XML, or you might want to support XML technologies like SVG. You'll probably know, if you do, that work with HTML. Let's look at an example, a simple XHTML document, and then step toward the high points. We could possibly cover everything you need to know on this topic. As with all things XML, it gets complicated fast. Some doc type. This XML, we need to add what is known namespace. All elements have to be extremely well formatted, not the trailing slash. Here is the close this wall void element. That's XML's format for closing a void tag. As an example, we are using SVG to draw a rectangle into your page. The details aren't important. What is important is that this is an XML format that lives inside XML, not HTML. We can embed it XML right in the page. Kinda cool. Closing all your elements squats around the attributes values, valid nesting of elements, and all that. Now, there's a few things you need to consider for your XHTML pages. Your page must be well formatted XML. Your page should be served with the application /XHTML plus XML meme types. For this, you'll need to make sure your server is serving this type. Neither read up on this or contact your server administration. Make sure to include the XHTML namespace in your XHTML element, which we've done above. Like we said, with XML there is a lot more to know and lots of things to watch out for. And as always with XML, may the force be with you. 9. Server-side scripting. Many web pages are generated by application are running on a server. For example, think about an online order system where a server generating pages is your step toward the other process on the online forum, where their server generation pages based on the forum messages that are stored in the date bus. So here we use the server application to process the form you created in chapter 14 for the Starbucks bean machine. Many hosting companies will let you create your own server application by writing server-side scripts and programs. Here is a few things server-side scripting will allow you to do. Build an online store complete with the product's shopping cart and the order system. Personalize your pages for each user based on his or her preferences. Deliver up-to-date news, events and information. Allow users to search your site. Allow users to help build the content of your site. To create server applications, you'll need to know a server-side scripting or programming language. There are a lot of competing languages for web development, and you're likely to get differing options, and on which language is best depending on who you ask. In fact, web languages are a little like automobiles. You can try anything from a Prius to a Hammer, and each has its own strengths and weakness, cost each of use, size, economy, and so on. Web languages are constantly evolving. PHP, Python, Perl, Node, JavaScript, Ruby and Rails, and Java Server Pages, JSPs, all are commonly used. If you're new to programming PHP, maybe the easiest language to start with, and there are millions of PHP-driven web pages, so you'd be in a good company. If you have some programming experience, you may want to try JSPs or Python. If you're more diligent with the Microsoft technologies, then you will want to look at the VP.NET and SPNet to a server-side solution. If JavaScript, if you're a geek, then check out Node JavaScript for a whole new approach. And for last 10, audio. HTML gives you a standard way to play audio on your page without a plugin. With the audio element, you'll find this in the element quite similar to the video element. Okay, look familiar? Yes, audio supports a similar functionality as the video, minus the video, obviously. Also, like video, each browser implements its own look and feel for player controls, which typically consist of a progress bar with play, pause, and volume controls. Sadly, like video, there is no standard coding for audio. Three formats are popular: MP3, WAV, and OGG Vorbis. You'll find that support for these formats varies across the browser's landscape. As of this writing, Chrome is the only browser that supports all three formats. Despite its simple functionality, the audio element and its JavaScript API give you lots of control. Using the elements with JavaScript, you can create interesting web experiences by handling the control and managing the audio playback in your code. And with HTML5, you can now do this without the overhead of having to use and learn and play like Adobe Flash. Okay. And JavaScript, we will talk about this in the next lesson. And this is our 100th lesson. Is over. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel, please. Comment, eat bananas, put likes, share with friends. Eat fruit, drink more water for the brains. Thank you. I like you. Bye.